been pretty young, less than a year.
From his first haircut?
Yeah, it was a curl and just kind of...
Jacob is Patty and Jerry Wetterling's oldest son.
Jerry put them on top of the refrigerator. I don't know why. They were just being silly.
These pictures and the memories are all they have left of Jacob.
This was when he had the broken arm. He just knew his arm wouldn't hurt if he had a puppy.
He was abducted, they think, by a total stranger.
The shirt he was actually wearing.
The rarest kind of kidnapping.
Oh, this is his parakeet. These are happy thoughts. But when you stop to think about how much time has gone by, it's kind of hard to swallow.
Wetterling was
Tomorrow
kidnapped.
is the 9th anniversary of the disappearance of Jacob
There is no
Wetterling.
new evidence uncovered in the case of Jacob
Wetterling has been missing for 18 years.
It has been 20 years.
It is almost hard to fathom. 25 years after his disappearance, still no...
On a chilling autumn evening in 1989, 3 innocent boys pedaled their bicycles homeward, oblivious to the horror that lay ahead. Only 2 would return. The mystery of Jacob Wetterling's abduction ignited the most exhaustive manhunt that Minnesota had ever launched. What ensued was a relentless yet frantic investigation, stretching over 20 long years, before the grim truth finally rose to the surface, a horrifying testament to the monsters that lurk in our midst. Welcome back to the chilling universe of solving crimes and mysteries. Here, we unravel enigmas from across the globe, delving into the depths of history, revealing hidden truths behind both solved and unsolved crimes, and unearthing spine-chilling scary stories that will haunt your thoughts. Today's video takes us deep into the chilling heart of the notorious Jacob Wetterling case. Journey along as we peel away the dark veil shrouding the eerie events that led to the disappearance of the 11-year-old boy. We'll navigate through the combined mystery and misery of this 27-year-long cold case, dissecting overlooked clues which, if found sooner, might have rewritten this tragic tale. We'll explain how this tragedy reverberated across the planet, changing our world as we knew it forever. Jacob Irwin Wetterling was born on February 17, 1978, in the serene town of Long Prairie, Minnesota. A perfect family of 6. Parents Jerry and Patty, and 4 children, Trevor, Amy, Jacob, and little Carmen. This was a family that reveled in bike rides and the thrill of the great outdoors. Behind the scenes, Patty, once a teacher, had traded her chalk for full-time childcare, while Jerry, a chiropractor, held the fort in St. Joseph, a stone's throw from the quaint Kiwi Court neighborhood. On the eve of October 22, 1989, as the frigid wind began to blow, Jerry and Patty decided to wine and dine with their friends, leaving their nestlings cocooned at home. As the clock struck 9, a phone rang out in the night. It was Jacob seeking permission to embark on a late-night movie run. Patty felt a twinge of unease. The prospect of her sons venturing out in the twilight hours, abandoning baby Carmen at home, was hard to digest. But persistence was the boys' middle name, and they charted an elaborate safety plan. Reflectors, flashlights, and a standby babysitter for Carmen, which was their neighbor. Amid these assurances, Jerry gave a reluctant nod. Decked in their safety gear, Jacob, his faithful partner in adventure Aaron, and young Trevor pedaled off into the night, their destination a lazy mile away. What possibly could go amiss? Arriving in town, their movie choice was The Naked Gun. With their movie selection in tow, the boys remounted their bikes, ready to charge home. About 2/3 into their journey back, their jovial chatter was brutally interrupted. A masked stranger, armed with a menacing revolver, emerged from the shadows of their path. The boys were ordered off their bikes and onto the cold ground, faces kissing the gravel and hearts pounding in fear. One by one, they were forced to reveal their names and ages to the stranger who sent chills down their spine. Jacob's brother Trevor was the first to be released, with orders of bolting into the oblivion of the adjacent woods. He was directed to run and not look back, otherwise he would be shot. Once Trevor was running, the man made Jacob and Aaron look at him. Aaron was then set free, being given the same message that Trevor had been. By the time Aaron felt he was far enough to look back, Jacob and the masked man were gone. Jacob was never seen alive again. When Trevor and Aaron arrived home, they went straight to their neighbor's house to tell them what had happened. The Wetterlings were called right away, as were the police. Officers were at the home promptly, and the search for Jacob began. By the following day, the FBI became involved along with other relevant agencies. Tips came flooding in, and the first possible sign of the perpetrator was found: tire and shoe tracks. Helicopters were brought in, joining volunteers on ATVs and horsebacks. Everyone was pulling together to bring Jacob home. An FBI profiler was brought onto the case within days of Jacob's disappearance. He suggested the man responsible was likely a white loner with a physical deformity who committed a similar crime in his past. Enter Jared Shirel. 9 months before Jacob was kidnapped, 12-year-old Jared was kidnapped and sexually assaulted. He was on his way home after dark when a man stopped and asked him for directions. Jared was then forced into the man's car after being threatened with a gun. Jared was later able to describe his attacker, recalling his low, raspy voice and chilling final command: "Run and don't look back or else I will shoot you." Naturally, this attack deeply affected Jared. For many years, Jared slept on his parents' bedroom floor, too afraid to be alone at night. But Jared hadn't been the only boy assaulted during this time. There had been a string of attacks on young boys. On the afternoon of October 25th, the quaint St. Joseph Church found itself wrapped in a cloak of unity. 500 souls gathered in a vigil, a prayer on their lips and hope in their hearts for Jacob's safe return. Meanwhile, the search for Jacob, now missing for more than a pair of agonizing days, took a disheartening turn. The hope of finding him alive was becoming a flicker clinging to an almost extinguished candle wick. Casting a wider net, the popular show A Current Affair showcased Jacob's baffling disappearance, turning what was a small-town search into a nationwide outcry. Tips and leads poured in from all nooks and corners of the country, and a reward of $100,000 was offered for Jacob's safe return. A 20-strong team of FBI agents was assigned to investigate the chilling web of this mysterious case. On November 6th, a sketch of a suspenseful figure was released to the public. Earlier spotted at the convenience store on the fateful night, this man, a white-haired Caucasian in his mid-30s, was noted for his eerie demeanor and penetrating gaze, unsettling those around him. The law enforcers hadn't been able to locate him, their last hopes pinned on this public disclosure. But as November painted its gloomy canvas, it came with a disheartening echo of the past. No significant progress. In December of 1989, Jared Shirel came forward. As his account unfolded, detectives began to see a possible connection between the two incidents. With a sketched image based on Jared's recall, a renewed wave of tips flooded in, reviving hopes. Looking back, it's impossible to overlook the blunders that marred the early investigation. On October 24th, a local high school sophomore and his father walked into the Stearns County Sheriff's Office, bearing striking information. There were about 8 instances of young boys being attacked in the neighboring town of Painesville over the past 2 years, similarly ambushed off their bikes, eerily paralleling Jacob's abduction. They advised the investigator to seek Officer Bill Drager in Painesville. For whatever reason, this lead was only followed up on in January 1990. This would lead to the name Danny Heinrich, a Painesville resident. Danny had previously been interviewed by an FBI agent in December 1989, where he denied any knowledge of either crimes involving Jacob or Jared. He was again interviewed by investigators on January 10th and questioned about the Painesville attacks. Danny also gave samples of his body hair and gave investigators his tennis shoes. 2 days later, Stearns County Sheriff's Detective Steve Mund took photos of the tires on Danny's blue Ford EXP. Comparing them to plaster casts taken near the scene of Jacob's abduction, Detective Mund found Danny's tires shared a striking resemblance. That said, they would need a whole lot more than tire tracks to tie Danny to this crime. Daniel James Heinrich gradually started grabbing the spotlight in the investigators' radar. On January 16, 1990, they got Jared to sit inside Danny's 1987 Mercury Topaz, a vehicle he owned till the start of 1989. When quizzed about how similar this vehicle was to the one he was abducted in, Jared ranked it at a solid 8 or 9 out of 10. A fiber left on Jared's clothing bore uncanny microscopic and optical resemblance to fibers extracted from the Mercury Topaz. Danny was brought into custody on February 9th under suspicion of kidnapping and sexually assaulting Jared, but he denied every allegation. Despite the substantial evidence pointing towards Danny, he was released without charge, and strangely, by 1991, his name faded from Jacob's ongoing investigation. Time was slipping quickly, and updates in the case were few and far between. However, on September 13, 1994, the U.S. Congress passed the Jacob Wetterling Crimes Against Children and Sexual Violent Offender Registration Act. This law marked the beginning of our present-day sex offender registry. The next decade blurred past with no meaningful progress regarding Jacob's case. Surprisingly, it was in 2015 that the FBI rekindled its interest in this cold case, thanks to the famous blog post by Joy Baker called, "Where Are You, Jacob?" The post went viral, launching the case in the spotlight once more. On July 10th, investigators struck a major string of hope, a positive DNA match. The genetic profile extracted from Jared's sweatshirt lined up perfectly with the DNA and body hair samples collected from Danny Heinrich years ago in 1990. An ensuing search of Danny's residence on July 28th exposed 19 volumes of explicit material featuring minors, though nothing directly linked to Jared or Jacob was discovered. Danny was then arrested for these vulgar possessions. But there was a hiccup. The statute of limitations had lapsed, and hence Danny could no longer be prosecuted for these offenses. In a twisted turn of events, the prosecutors managed to strike an unanticipated deal with Danny Heinrich's legal counsel. On August 31, 2016, Danny, guarded by investigators, led them straight to the long-hidden grave, the resting place of Jacob Wetterling's remains. Jacob had been buried on a farm outside of Painesville. 1 week later, Danny Heinrich confessed to the court how he abducted and killed Jacob, explaining that he became panicked after hearing police sirens, which made him decide to shoot Jacob. Along with admitting to Jacob's murder, Danny admitted to assaulting Jared. At the age of 53, Danny Heinrich was finally handed a prison term of 20 years, but only on charges pertaining to minors' illicit materials. Regrettably, the scales of justice remained imbalanced in this case. After committing horrendous offenses, Heinrich managed to live the prime of his life unaffectedly, evading the rightful sentencing for a grave crime, murder. The journey was agonizing, filled with 27 years of ceaseless heartache. But the Wetterling family at last found closure as they laid their beloved son to rest. Jacob's legacy continues to shine, acting as a beacon of hope to remind us all that no matter how bleak the circumstances may seem, there's always a glimmer of light at journey's end. Jacob, may your soul rest in eternal peace.